Hilda, Chapter 11, Closure. As the train rattled along the tracks, I sat by the window, my fingers tracing on the glass. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels against the rails provided a strange comfort, grounding me in the present as the landscape blurred past. The air was thick with a mix of anxiety and anticipation, and I felt the weight of my thoughts settle heavily on my chest. The Swiss countryside slipped away behind me, replaced by rolling hills and patches of dark forests that loomed like sentinels. My heart raced with each familiar landmark as I passed, flashes of memories cascading through my mind like old film reels. Fields of green dotted with wildflowers recalled lazy summer afternoons, villages nestled in valleys where laughter echoed in the streets and children played carefree, whispered of a past that seemed almost unattainable now. I stole glances at my fellow passengers, their faces tapestry of stories, but I felt isolated in my own thoughts. The train surged forward, and I caught sight of a distant hilltop, the silhouette of a once familiar home, the very essence of belonging that now felt like a lifetime away. I could almost hear the laughter of friends who had been lost to time, their faces blurring in the shadows of joy tinged with sorrow. The scenery shifted again, revealing remnants of what had once been a house, a barn, all reduced to memories and rubble. A pang of regret twisted in my gut. It was a reminder of the destruction that had swept through like a thief in the night. I had escaped, yes, but at what cost? My fingers brushed against the cool metal of the necklace hanging around my neck. It felt like a tether to my past, to her, each touch reigniting memories of stolen moments, whispered hopes, and unfulfilled promises. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, trying to conjure her presence amidst the haunting echoes of my mind. As we approached the border, the train slowed and my pulse quickened. I could almost taste the air thickening with memories, the anticipation wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. I felt it tugging at my heart, a mix of fear and hope, a yearning for a place I had longed for but dreaded to face. The train came to a halt, and the conductor's voice broke through my reverie. I opened my eyes, watching as people gathered their belongings and shuffled toward the exit. I followed suit, rising from my seat with a determined heaviness. Stepping onto the platform, the air was charged with the scent of rain-soaked earth and the bittersweet sense of homecoming. The sky loomed above, gray and heavy, reflecting the tremulous feeling brewing within me. As I took my first steps onto familiar soil, I felt an undeniable pull towards the past, a past that had shaped me, haunted me, and now beckoned me to confront it. Here I was, caught between two worlds, the life I had built in exile and the remnants of a childhood lost to the war. Each step was laden with significance, a silent promise that I would face what lay ahead, no matter how painful it might be. I chose to go back to my childhood house, the place I had escaped from when I was barely 17, driven by desperation to break free from the suffocating grip of my father. Now, at 23, I stood on the precipice of a past that haunted me like a ghost, taunting me with memories of laughter and screams that echoed through the walls. As I walked the familiar road, my heart twisted with each step. I had traversed these streets daily on my way to school, yet they felt foreign now. The houses I had known, the faces of neighbors that had once smiled at me, were mere shadows of their former selves. Everything had changed. A new shop stood where the old bakery used to be, its bright signage mocking the quiet despair that clung to the air like fog. There was no trace of what I once called home, just the stark reality that everything had been stripped away. Hans was dead, just like Carl, and my father, the man who had loomed over me like a dark cloud, I had taken as life. My mother, what had become of her? I had not received a letter or whisper of her existence since I fled. The silence was deafening, a chilling reminder that she had likely perished as well in the war. What an ending it had become, the chapters of my life written in blood and sorrow. As I approached the house, my breath caught in my throat. The once vibrant facade now stood in decay, the paint peeling like the layers of my own buried memories. I was the last one left, the sole survivor of a family fractured by ideology and violence. Here, in this forgotten place, I felt the weight of my solitude, the darkness of my existence pressing against my chest. I had escaped the war, the horrors that had chased me across borders, but I had not escaped the ghosts of my past. The house loomed ahead, a monument to a life that had once been filled with dreams, now reduced to mere echoes of what could have been. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead, knowing that this return was not just a physical journey, but a reckoning with everything I had lost and the choices that had led me here. I needed to go there, her house, the place that had once offered me refuge and warmth during the darkest days. It was a compulsion, an ache deep within me that drew me back to the only space that had ever felt like home, even if that safety had been a fragile illusion. As I approached, the familiar outline of the house emerged from the overgrown trees that had once seemed like sentinels watching over my childhood. My heart raced, memories swirling in my mind like autumn leaves caught in the wind. I had thought of this place countless times since I had left, and now I was finally standing at its doorstep. But something unexpected caught my eye. A little girl was playing in the garden, her laughter ringing out like a chime, pure and joyful. I froze, taken aback by the sight. This had once been a garden where Max lay there by the first time I visited it. I felt a pang of nostalgia, the kind that stabbed at my heart, reminding me of innocence that had been stolen from me so brutally. Kathy, come in. Your lunch is getting cold. A woman's voice broke through my reverie, calling the child inside. My breath heaved at the sound. It was as if the house had been reborn, infused with new life. Kathy's voice lit up as she ran toward the house, her small feet pattering on the path I had walked so many times before. My heart dropped as I took in the tender scene, the woman standing at the door, arms open, ready to embrace her daughter. It was a sight that brought both joy and deep sorrow, a reminder of the love and security I had yearned for, but had been torn away from. As Kathy disappeared into the house, I stood rooted to the spot, my chest tight with a mix of longing and heartbreak. What a lucky child she was, I thought, unaware of the shadows that lurked beyond these walls, unaware of the ghost that whispered my name. I was a stranger here now, a mere observer of a life that could have been mine, a life filled with warmth, laughter, safety, everything I had fought so hard to reclaim but had lost forever. What could I do now? Go to Bruno? Tell him I was sorry that his sister was killed halfway to Switzerland? Did he know? Would he even care? The thought of facing him made my stomach churn. I could imagine the questions he might ask, the anger in his eyes when he realized the truth I had tried so hard to bury. As I started to walk again, I pushed those thoughts aside. One foot in front of the other, I moved forward, my body guided by some instinct I couldn't quite understand. It was only when I paused to catch my breath that I became aware of the dull ache radiating from my feet. The ground felt unforgiving beneath me, each step a reminder of the journey I had taken, of the weight of my memories dragging me down. But I finally did it. I went there, clinging to the hope that at least this home wasn't reduced to ashes, that it still stood as a sanctuary for someone. I felt a flicker of pride in my memory. She had given me this address years ago, and somehow it remained etched in my mind, a lifeline leading me back to the past I thought I had to lose forever. As I walked, each step grew heavier with anticipation. The air felt thick with the weight of my memories, each one a reminder of the warmth and safety I had once known in that place. When I finally arrived, I paused at a distance, taking in the side of the house. It looked the same, yet different. Time had a way of reshaping even the most familiar of places. The garden, once vibrant and full of life, was now overgrown with weeds, and the paint on the walls was peeling, but it still held the semblance of the love that had once filled its room. I squinted to get a better look, and that's when I saw him, an elderly man, seeming like in his 90s, stooped over a clothesline, struggling to hang up the garments that fluttered in the breeze. My heart sank. This couldn't be Bruno. I must be seeing things, letting my imagination run wild. The t-shirt in his hand slipped from his grasp and fell to the ground. After the moment of disbelief, he averted his gaze, retreating inside the house. Wait, wait, Mr. Bauer! I shouted, panic rising in my chest as I hurried after him. But by the time I reached the door, it clicked shut, stealing him away from me. I knocked frantically, desperation clawing at my throat. Mr. Bauer, Mr. Bauer, please, I need to talk. Please, please, please. From within, I heard a muffled sob. Go away, he shouted, his voice thick with anguish. Please, please, Mr. Bauer, it hurts me too. Please open the door. I pleaded, my voice breaking. Please, let me just explain. His voice rose again, filled with rage and grief. You killed my sister. You did. Tears streamed down my face, my heart shattering at his words. Mr. Bauer, I didn't want her to die. She died in my arms. I loved her. I truly loved her. I sank to my knees, my back pressed against the door, the cold wood grounding me in that moment of despair. Mr. Bauer? I cried. I haven't slept a single night in all these years. I see her every time I close my eyes. I talk to her in the dark and I can escape her memory. I can't do this anymore. With each word, the weight of my sorrow crushed me further. All I wanted was a closure, that's it. I'm so sorry, I never wanted her to die. I buried my face in my hands, my sobs echoing against the door, raw and relentless. I cried as loudly as I could, hoping he could hear my pain through the barrier between us, praying that somehow he could feel the depth of my remorse. I continued, my voice shaking. Every night I struggled with her void. It was like this massive hole in my chest that wouldn't go away. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling her absence wrap around me. I would think about her laughter, how it could light up the darkest days, and then it would hit me that I'd never hear it again. Some nights I could almost see her like a ghost standing just out of reach. But whenever I tried to hold on, she just slipped away. I replayed our last moments together over and over in my mind, wishing I could change things, wishing I could have done something different to save her. It tore me apart knowing I was there and I couldn't help it. And I'm thinking about what the hell did I mean to her? Was I really this important to her like she is to me? I mean, sometimes it felt like I was everything to her, like I could see it in the way she looked at me. How her eyes sparkled when we talked about our dreams and our plans. But then in the quiet moments, I wonder if I was just a passing chapter in her life. And nothing more, nothing. After a long silence, the door creaked open, and I instinctively stood up, straighter, my heart racing. As the lights spilled out from the house, I could finally see his face more clearly. It seemed to have aged 70 years in 7 years. Deep lines edged his forehead, and sorrow hung in the corners of his eyes like a heavy fog. I took a shaky breath, and as I opened my mouth to speak, his voice cut through the air, trembling and raw. They found her body a few days after what happened. The weight of his words crushed me, and I felt the ground beneath me shift as I stared into his haunted eyes. He continued, They didn't find you around her, so I guessed you might be alive. I knew you would come back. Each word he spoke seemed to echo in the silence, reverberating through my chest. Then, as if summoning a ghost from the past, he said, But they found your dad next to her. You killed him, didn't you? I felt the truth hang heavy between us, and I nodded slowly, unable to voice the confession that had haunted my nights. His voice dropped to a whisper, laced with a mixture of pain and reluctant understanding. I only forgive you just because you took her revenge. A tear slipped down my cheek, an involuntary response to the raw honesty of our shared grief. In that moment, I could see the flicker of something deep in his eyes. Maybe it was the recognition of our shared loss, or perhaps an acknowledgement of the dark choices we both made in a world turned upside down. Then Bruno's hand lifted, and I noticed he was holding something, a crumpled piece of paper, the edges worn as if it had traveled through time itself. This was found in Martha's home. It's for you, he said, his voice heavy with unspoken memories. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I took the paper. The impulse to open it swelling inside me, but just as I was about to unfold it, his voice rose sharply, tinged with urgency. Not here. Bruno paused, the air thick with tension. She's buried in Sonnenhügel, he began, but the words hung unspoken, swallowed by the weight of our shared history. Now just leave here, I can't stand seeing you. His tone was final, and I felt a shiver run down my spine, the enormity of our past pushing me away. I stood there, torn between the desire to hold on to the last shred of connection with her and the aching reality of my own guilt. Here I was, standing over a place I both hated and needed. Hated or accepted, this was her home forever. I went closer and knelt down, letting my eyes trace the shape of her name etched into the stone. She was here, lying beneath my feet, resting in a way I never could imagine for her. She was really here. I didn't say a word. My chest was heavy with things I couldn't speak aloud, even if she were listening. In my hand, I held the paper Bruno had given me. It felt thin and fragile, almost unreal, as if it might disappear if I looked away for too long. But I knew that for this conversation, our last, one-sided though it was, I had to read her words. This was all I had left of her voice, our final exchange, a conversation she had started without me, and I had no idea what she had left behind, what secrets, confessions, or goodbyes might be waiting within those folds. With a breath I didn't know I was holding, I opened the paper, ready to hear her one last time.
I have spent countless hours listening, letting her words fill the silence, as if her voice alone could drown out all the world's cruelty. She speaks of her fears, her sorrows, her laughter, her dreams. Every feeling she has ever experienced, she's shared with me, openly, vulnerably. And in return, I've watched her, taken in each small detail, each fleeting expression. Yet, have I ever had the chance to tell her what I see when I look at her? As I write this, she's beside me, sleeping so peacefully that I barely dare to breathe. Every quiet breath from her feels like a miracle I get to witness, a pulse of life in this young girl who holds on so tightly to a world that hasn't been kind to her. Her cries, her laughter, even in her dreams, all of it is a reminder of the fierce, unbroken spirit in her, one that wants to live freely as she was meant to. Our journey begins in a few days, and the thought that haunts me is simple. Will I have the strength to protect her, to guide her to the safety she deserves, to save this little girl with thoughts vast and dreams fierce, someone whom fate has my Lord placed into my hands? I find myself ready to give everything to see her safe. She is family. I don't know who will read this letter in the end. Perhaps it will reach you, Hilda, after we return to Germany, safe and together. And maybe you, a Nazi, are reading this now, searching for some sign of Hilda in these words. I have to inform you, I do not intend to return alone. Hilda is a part of me now, and I cannot, will not, come back to this house without her by my side. But should you be the kind of person who searches for her here, hoping to take her, let me tell you this, you will never find her. You could tear this house apart, search the cellar and the attics, but she will remain beyond your reach. For she is in my heart, and you cannot touch liberty when it is rooted so deeply within someone's soul. To my Hilda, if you read this, know that I love you, fiercely, wholly, as if you were my own child. And until my last breath, I will carry you forward, shielding you from every darkness that dares to come close. Marta.
I looked at her again, or at least at her name engraved into the stone, and I felt this strange mix of a smile and tears all at once. The only thing I could do was lay there beside her, on that cold ground, and reach out, laying my hand next to hers as if she could feel it. I whispered, "Thank you." I stayed there for a long while, then finally spoke again. "I guess I won't be able to visit you too often, and I'm sorry for that, but I'll try to come back every holiday. Christmas is coming, I'll be back to see you then. But for now, I have to return to Switzerland by the end of the week. You know, I'm a chef now. It's hard, but I like it." I paused, realizing something as I said it. I guess I was wrong. That letter wasn't our last conversation.
I suddenly was on bed at the bus station, feet ringing, barely reaching the ground. I kept looking around, hoping I'd spot her, nervous but excited too. My friend nudged me, raising an eyebrow. "Aren't you coming with us, bro?" I shook my head. "No, I'm waiting for someone, bro. I'll be leaving alone today." He gave me a funny look. "Well, we've only got 2 pages of math homework, right?" "Yeah, that's it. See you tomorrow," I replied, watching him walk away. Alone again, I scanned the faces around me, looking for her, the 50-year-old woman in a blue raincoat. In my head, I just started imagining what she looked like, someone with that kind of quiet strength like Bawa. And then I saw her, stepping off the bus, looking around like she was a bit lost. I waved, catching her attention. Yes, she looked like the Bawa in my head. "Hey, little boy, are you drawn?" she asked, walking over. I nodded, unzipping my backpack to pull out the notebook. "Yeah, I found your notebook." She took it, her fingers tracing over the worn cover as if it was something precious. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. I felt my heart race, and before I could chicken out, I asked, "Are you Hilda?" She looked at me, surprised. For a second, we just stared at each other, like some big, invisible thing hung between us. I didn't mean to read your diary," I stammered, feeling my cheeks go hot. "I'm sorry about that." She smiled, forgiving and understanding. "It's okay." I've swallowed, not sure what to say, then finally blurted out, You're you're really strong." She didn't answer right away, just looked at me, and I felt like maybe, somehow, she understood what I was trying to say. Then she tucked the notebook under her arm, her fingers still brushing over like it was something sacred. And as we stood there, I felt this strange connection, like somehow her story and mine were linked, even if I didn't fully get how.